Millionaire's son mocked a janitor's clothes? Until he discovered who owned the building. In the gleaming halls of Manhattan's most prestigious corporate tower, where million-dollar deals are made and broken every day, a young man in a $3,000 suit was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. He thought he knew who held the real power in that building. He thought he understood how the world worked. He thought wrong. What happened in those marble corridors that Tuesday morning would shake the very foundation of everything he believed about status, respect, and true wealth. Because sometimes, the person you least expect to hold all the cards actually owns the entire game. But what happened next no one could have predicted. Meet Marcus Williams. 24 years old, heir to a tech fortune worth over $200 million, and completely convinced that his designer clothes and family name made him untouchable. Every morning, Marcus strutted through the Pinnacle Tower like he owned the place, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floors with the rhythm of pure arrogance. Marcus had never worked a day in his life, but that didn't stop him from treating everyone around him like they were beneath his notice. To him, the world was divided into two types of people: those who mattered and those who served those who mattered. Then there was Samuel. 62 years old, wearing the same faded blue uniform he'd worn for nearly 3 decades. His hands were weathered from years of honest work, his back slightly bent from mopping countless floors and emptying thousands of trash bins. To everyone who passed him in those halls, Samuel was invisible. Just another janitor doing a job that nobody wanted to think about. But appearances, as Marcus was about to discover, can be devastatingly deceiving. It started on a Tuesday morning in November. Marcus was running late for a meeting with potential investors, his father breathing down his neck about finally proving himself worthy of the family business. The elevator was crowded, filled with the usual mix of executives and office workers, all pressed together in that awkward morning silence. That's when Samuel stepped in. He was pushing his cleaning cart, trying to make room for everyone while keeping his supplies from spilling. His uniform was clean but obviously old, patched in a few places, and his shoes had seen better decades. As the elevator lurched upward, Marcus caught sight of Samuel's reflection in the polished steel doors. And something inside Marcus snapped. "Seriously?" Marcus said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Can't the help use the service elevator?" The entire elevator went dead quiet. Samuel looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes in the reflection, but said nothing. Marcus wasn't done. "I mean, look at that uniform. What is that, from the Clinton administration? Someone should tell management that having staff who look like they shop at thrift stores isn't exactly the image we want to project." A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the elevator. Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but still he remained silent. "Maybe if you spent less money on whatever it is people like you spend money on, you could afford some decent work clothes," Marcus continued, emboldened by what he mistook for weakness in Samuel's silence. The elevator reached the 15th floor. Samuel pushed his cart out without a word, without even looking back. But as the doors closed, something flickered in his eyes. Something that Marcus was too blinded by his own ego to recognize. It was pity. Over the next few weeks, Marcus made Samuel his personal target. Every interaction became an opportunity for humiliation. When Samuel was mopping the executive break room, Marcus would deliberately walk through with muddy shoes. When Samuel was emptying trash bins, Marcus would make loud comments about the help being slow. "You know," Marcus announced to a group of young executives during lunch, "I've been thinking about starting a charity. Maybe we could buy proper uniforms for the cleaning staff. As a tax write-off, of course." The group laughed, but not everyone was amused. Sarah Chin, a junior analyst who'd worked her way up from nothing, watched Marcus with growing disgust. She'd seen how Samuel worked, always with dignity, always with a quiet professionalism that commanded respect from those wise enough to notice. But Marcus wasn't wise. He was just cruel. What Marcus didn't know was that every insult, every mocking laugh, every degrading comment was being carefully observed. Not just by Sarah, not just by the other employees who were growing tired of his behavior, but by someone else entirely. Someone who had been watching Marcus for a very long time. The first sign that something wasn't quite right came during the company Christmas party. Marcus was holding court near the champagne fountain, regaling anyone who would listen with stories of his latest shopping sprees and vacation plans. The party was in full swing, executives mixing with staff in that forced holiday camaraderie that happens once a year. Samuel was there too, not as a guest but working. He was quietly clearing glasses and straightening tables, invisible as always to most of the crowd. That's when Marcus spotted him. "Oh, perfect," Marcus said loud enough for half the room to hear. "Hey janitor. Make sure you get all the good crystal. Some of us actually know how much this stuff costs." But instead of the usual silence, something unexpected happened. Samuel looked up, and for the first time since Marcus had known him, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't even a bitter smile. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing something that everyone else in the room was about to find out. "Crystal's nice," Samuel said quietly, his voice carrying further than it should have in the crowded room. "But I've always preferred the real thing." Marcus laughed, not understanding. "The real thing? What would you know about the real thing?" Samuel's smile widened. "More than you might think, son." That word, son, hit Marcus like a slap. Nobody called him son except his father. Nobody had the right. But something about the way Samuel said it, with that quiet confidence, that knowing smile, made the hairs on the back of Marcus's neck stand up. Before Marcus could respond, Samuel had already moved away, disappearing back into his world of quiet service and invisible labor. But the seed was planted. For the first time, Marcus Williams felt a flicker of uncertainty. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Something about Samuel's smile, about the way he'd said "more than you might think," gnawed at him. It was probably nothing. Samuel was just a janitor with delusions of grandeur, trying to save face after months of well-deserved humiliation. But Marcus couldn't shake it. The next morning he decided to do a little digging. Nothing serious, just enough to satisfy his curiosity and probably find something even more embarrassing about Samuel's pathetic life. He started with HR, using his family connections to access employee files. Samuel Washington, the records showed. Hired 28 years ago. Excellent performance reviews. Never missed a day. Never caused any problems. Clean record but nothing special. Certainly nothing that would explain that knowing smile. Marcus dug deeper. He checked Samuel's address, a modest apartment in Queens. He looked up public records, no property ownership, no flashy purchases, no signs of hidden wealth. Everything pointed to exactly what Samuel appeared to be, a career janitor living paycheck to paycheck. So why couldn't Marcus shake the feeling that he was missing something? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and it would change everything. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Marcus's world started to crumble. He was in his father's office, half listening to a lecture about responsibility and earning respect, when his father mentioned something that made Marcus's blood run cold. "The building's ownership is changing hands next month," his father said casually, signing documents without looking up. "We'll need to renegotiate our lease. The new owner is supposed to be coming by for a walkthrough this week." Marcus barely heard the rest. All he could think about was Samuel's smile, that quiet confidence, the way he'd said "more than you might think." It couldn't be. It was impossible. But the seed of doubt had grown into something that demanded answers. That evening Marcus did what he should have done weeks ago. He hired a private investigator. Not for anything illegal, just a comprehensive background check on Samuel Washington. If there was nothing to find, at least he'd have peace of mind. There was something. The call came 2 days later. "Mr. Williams?" The investigator's voice was carefully neutral. "We need to talk. In person. There are some things about Mr. Washington that you need to know." The meeting took place in a small cafe far from the Pinnacle Tower. The investigator, a grizzled former cop named Detective Rodriguez, slid a thick folder across the table to Marcus. "Samuel Washington," Rodriguez began, "isn't exactly who you think he is." Marcus opened the folder, his hands trembling slightly. The first document nearly made him choke on his coffee. Property records. Not for a modest apartment in Queens, but for buildings. Lots of buildings. Including the Pinnacle Tower, Rodriguez said quietly. Purchased 28 years ago through a shell corporation. The same month Samuel Washington started working there as a janitor. Marcus stared at the papers, his mind reeling. That's impossible. Why would someone who owns a building work as a janitor in that same building? Rodriguez shrugged. Keep reading. The next documents painted a picture that Marcus could never have imagined. Samuel Washington wasn't just wealthy. He was extraordinarily wealthy. Real estate holdings across 3 states. Investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions. Business interests that spanned continents. And it had all started with one brilliant, radical decision 28 years ago. Samuel Washington was a different man back then, Rodriguez explained. Fresh out of Harvard Business School, heir to a small construction fortune. But something happened that changed everything. His father died, left him the business, and Samuel realized he had no idea what real work actually looked like. The story that unfolded was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. So he made a choice. He would spend 1 year working every job in every building he owned. Custodian, security guard, maintenance worker, you name it. He wanted to understand his business from the ground up, literally. Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper. 1 year. Rodriguez smiled grimly. That was 28 years ago. Turns out, Samuel Washington discovered something down there in those service corridors that he'd never found in any boardroom. What? Purpose. Respect. The satisfaction of honest work. And most importantly, the real measure of human character. Marcus sat in stunned silence as Rodriguez continued. Samuel never stopped working as a janitor, even as his wealth grew. He'd spend his days cleaning and maintaining, his evenings managing an empire worth over $800 million. He became two people, Samuel the custodian, invisible to everyone around him, and Samuel Washington the businessman, one of the most powerful property owners on the East Coast. The investigator pulled out more documents. He owns 47 buildings in Manhattan alone, shopping centers in 6 states, office complexes that house Fortune 500 companies, and he runs it all from a small office in Queens, right next to his apartment. Marcus felt sick. Every insult, every cruel joke, every moment of deliberate humiliation flashed through his mind. He'd been mocking one of the richest men in New York City. But why? Marcus managed to ask. Why keep working as a janitor? Rodriguez leaned back. From what I can tell, it started as research and became something else entirely. Samuel Washington discovered that when people think you're invisible, they show you who they really are. No masks, no pretense, no performance. Just raw, unfiltered character. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. He's been watching everyone in that building for nearly 3 decades, Rodriguez continued. Watching how they treat the people they think don't matter. And he's been taking notes. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the Pinnacle Tower with his world completely upended. Every step through those marble halls felt different now. Every person he passed looked at him differently, or maybe he was just finally seeing them clearly. He found Samuel in the supply closet on the 15th floor, methodically organizing cleaning supplies with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown every day for 28 years. We need to talk, Marcus said. Samuel looked up and there was that smile again. But now Marcus understood what it meant. I figured you might come around eventually, Samuel said, continuing to stack bottles of floor cleaner. Took you longer than most. Why? The word came out strangled. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you stop me? Samuel straightened, meeting Marcus's eyes directly for the first time. Tell you what, exactly? That insulting people is wrong? That treating workers with dignity is basic human decency? Those aren't lessons you learn by being told, son. Those are lessons you learn by living with the consequences of your choices. Marcus felt something break inside him. I've been horrible to you. Yes, Samuel agreed simply. You have been. The honesty was devastating. What happens now? Marcus asked, his voice small. Samuel studied him for a long moment. That depends entirely on you. What happened next would become legendary in the halls of the Pinnacle Tower. The following Monday, during the regular all-hands meeting that Marcus's father held for department heads and key employees, something unprecedented occurred. Samuel Washington walked into the conference room. Not as a janitor but as the building's owner. The room fell dead silent as he took a seat at the head of the table, directly across from Marcus's father. He was still wearing his janitor's uniform, still carrying himself with that quiet dignity that had marked every interaction Marcus had ever had with him. Ladies and gentlemen, Samuel said, his voice carrying the authority that comes from owning everything around you, I think it's time we discuss some changes in building policy. Marcus watched his father's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, dawning horror as the truth settled in. For 28 years, Samuel continued, I've had a unique perspective on the character of the people who work in my building. I've seen how you treat those you consider beneath you. I've watched how you behave when you think nobody important is watching. The room was so quiet you could hear hearts breaking. Samuel's eyes found Marcus across the table. Some of you have shown remarkable kindness, professionalism, and basic human decency. Those people will find their lease renewals very generous. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Others, Samuel said quietly, have shown me exactly who they are. And I believe them. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, 3 companies had lost their leases. 4 executives had been banned from the building entirely. And Marcus's father's company had been given 30 days to find new offices. But the most devastating moment came when Samuel addressed Marcus directly. Mr. Williams, he said, using the formal address that somehow felt like the cruelest cut of all, "I want you to understand something. Your behavior toward me wasn't just rude or unprofessional. It was a window into your character. And character, son, is the only currency that really matters." Marcus tried to speak, but Samuel wasn't finished. "You spent months trying to humiliate someone you thought was powerless. You used your perceived status as a weapon against someone you believed couldn't fight back. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of man you are." The words hung in the air like a judgment. "But here's the thing about character," Samuel continued, his voice softening slightly. "It's not fixed. It's not permanent. Every day, every interaction, every choice is an opportunity to be better than you were yesterday." He stood up, gathering his papers. "Whether you take that opportunity or not is entirely up to you." In the weeks that followed, the story spread through Manhattan's business community like wildfire. The millionaire's son who mocked a janitor, only to discover the janitor owned the building, the company, and half the block. Marcus became a cautionary tale, a punchline, a symbol of everything wrong with inherited wealth and unearned privilege. His father's business struggled to find new office space. Their reputation was damaged, their relationship strained. The family fortune, while still substantial, felt fragile in ways it never had before. But the most profound changes were happening inside Marcus himself. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to face real consequences for his actions. For the first time, he realized that wealth and status were not shields against the judgment of character. And for the first time he began to question everything he thought he knew about respect, power, and what it truly meant to be successful. 6 months later, Marcus did something he never thought he would do. He went to Samuel's real office in Queens, not the supply closet in the Pinnacle Tower, and he asked for a job. Not as an executive. Not as a manager. As a janitor. "I want to learn," Marcus said simply. "I want to understand what I've been missing." Samuel studied him for a long time, looking for something in Marcus's eyes. Finally he nodded. "Minimum wage," Samuel said. 6 months. No special treatment. You'll work the night shift, cleaning offices for people who won't even see you. Marcus swallowed hard. "And after 6 months? "After 6 months, we'll see who you've become." Working as a janitor was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. Not just the physical labor, though that was challenging enough. It was the invisibility, the dismissal, the casual disrespect from people who saw him as nothing more than part of the furniture. But slowly something began to change. He started to notice things he'd never seen before. The security guard who worked double shifts to pay for his daughter's college tuition. The administrative assistant who stayed late every night to help co-workers with their projects. The executives who said please and thank you, who treated every person with dignity regardless of their job title. And he began to understand what Samuel had been trying to teach him all along. Respect isn't earned through wealth or status or family connections. It's earned through character, through consistency, through treating every person as if they matter. Because they do. At the end of 6 months, Marcus met with Samuel again. This time in the Pinnacle Tower's conference room where his humiliation had begun. "So," Samuel said, "what did you learn?" Marcus had been preparing for this question for weeks, but when the moment came, the words came from somewhere deeper than preparation. "I learned that I spent 24 years looking at the world completely wrong," he said. "I thought power meant having control over other people. I thought respect meant fear. I thought success meant having more than everyone else around me." He paused, looking out the window at the city below. "But real power is using your position to lift others up. Real respect comes from earning it through your actions. And real success is measured by how you treat the people who can do nothing for you." Samuel nodded slowly. "And what are you going to do with that knowledge?" Marcus had been thinking about that question for months. He'd made his decision weeks ago, but saying it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. "I want to keep working," he said. "Not as a janitor forever, but starting from the ground up. I want to earn my place in business the right way. And I want to use whatever success I achieve to make sure no one else has to be invisible just to pay their bills." Samuel smiled, and this time it was warm, genuine, proud. "Then let's get to work." 5 years later, Marcus Williams stood in the lobby of the Pinnacle Tower, but everything was different. He was no longer the arrogant heir to someone else's fortune. He was the CEO of a company he'd built from nothing, specializing in fair labor practices and employee dignity. His offices were in the Pinnacle Tower, rented from Samuel at a price that reflected not just square footage but character. Samuel was still there too, still working as a janitor 3 days a week. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. It kept him grounded, he said. It reminded him why he was in business in the first place. That morning, as Marcus passed Samuel in the hallway, they exchanged nods of mutual respect. Two men who had found their way to understanding what really mattered. Later that day, Marcus would give a speech to a group of young entrepreneurs about the importance of humility in leadership. He would tell them about the most expensive lesson of his life, taught by a man in a faded blue uniform who owned everything but pretended to have nothing. He would tell them that sometimes the person you least expect to hold all the power actually owns the entire game. And he would tell them that the measure of a person's character isn't found in their bank account or their job title or their family name. It's found in how they treat the people they think can do nothing for them. The story of Marcus Williams and Samuel Washington spread far beyond Manhattan's business district. It became a reminder that in a world obsessed with status and wealth, the most important currency is still character. Samuel Washington continued to build his empire, but he never stopped working those 3 days a week as a janitor. When reporters asked him why, his answer was always the same. The moment you think you're too important to do honest work, he would say, is the moment you lose sight of why you're working in the first place. Marcus Williams went on to become one of the most respected young leaders in American business, known not for his family connections or his inherited wealth, but for his commitment to treating every employee as if they were family. And every year, on the anniversary of his humiliation in that conference room, Marcus would spend a day working as a janitor in the Pinnacle Tower. Not as penance but as a reminder that everyone matters. That dignity isn't determined by your job title. That respect is earned through character, not inherited through circumstance. And that sometimes, the person emptying your trash can own the building, the block, and everything you thought you knew about success. In a world that often mistakes wealth for worth, power for character, and status for success, the story of Marcus and Samuel stands as a testament to a simple but profound truth. The way you treat people when you think it doesn't matter is the only thing that really does. Because you never know who's really watching. You never know who holds the real power. And you never know when the person you've been looking down on will turn out to be the one looking down on you. In the end, we are all judged not by what we have, but by who we are when we think nobody important is watching. The question is, who will you choose to be?